I am probably one of the biggest proponents of cannabis that never smokes it. Like silver, I believe that it is a threat to the generational debt-based debt and death Ponzi scheme in which we live in. I believe that cannabis is a gift from God, and that it is a direct threat to many of the industries that fund this debt and death paradigm. Just like when I explored the silver story, the more that I looked into cannabis, the more that I became aware of its incredible potential in a post-dollar paradigm. My hope is with this video that it gets people to at least question their perceived reality of cannabis, much like how you might have done when you first started looking into the silver story. As you know, I grew up a staunch Republican, Marine, businessman, and stayed away from cannabis because of the propaganda and the intense legal ramifications associated with it. As I awoke to the illusion of our political and financial reality, I went on a path of questioning everything else, from spirituality to drugs to human consciousness. There I found the real reason why cannabis is illegal, because it is a powerful weapon against the debt and death paradigm. Cannabis has been used throughout history on every continent and by every civilization. Cannabis is the strongest natural fiber. It was used for rope, parachutes, a replacement for steel, and even the word canvas comes from the word cannabis. It easily grows everywhere and is actually used to reclaim land once abandoned. It grows in poor soil conditions and can grow more crops and yield more plant matter than most other crops out there. In 1619, the King of England ordered farmers in the American colonies that they, quote, must grow cannabis, and even allowed people to pay their taxes in cannabis. George Washington grew cannabis, and even the Declaration of Independence was written on it. By 1850, there were over 8,000 plantations of 2,000 acres or more that grew cannabis. Cannabis was so prevalent that it was actually pictured on the 1914 $10 Federal Reserve note that showed the wealth of our nation in manufacturing and agriculture, specifically the cannabis harvest featured on the left. With the abolition of slavery in 1865, there was not really an economical way of processing cannabis until 1935, when the decorticator made cannabis extremely economical, and it was named the next billion-dollar crop by Popular Mechanics, since it can be used in 25,000 products, from dynamite to cellophane. In fact, if you look at all the uses of cannabis, it's not so much a crop as it is an industry. With the new uses and devalued dollar of today, cannabis would not be a billion-dollar crop. I believe it would be a trillion-dollar industry. The most basic reason why cannabis is illegal is simple economics. What would the effect of cannabis being legalized to the paper, corn, cotton, alcohol, tobacco, prescription drug, prison, and even banking industries? How many of the 45 million Americans hooked on powerful antidepressants that have been known to cause homicidal and suicidal psychotic breaks would be better off smoking cannabis? How many less prisoners, prisons, police, court, drug raids, seizures would there be if cannabis was made legal? How much money would the medical and industrial complex lose if people knew that cannabis cured cancer, like in this recent Harvard study? How much money and power would flow out of the money centers if nature was made legal? The person perhaps most responsible for making cannabis illegal is William Randolph Hearst. You know, that billionaire megalomaniac propagandist warmonger that is depicted in Citizen Kane, pining over a childhood toy on his deathbed after wasting his entire life pursuing power over others.
Delightful in Cuba, stop. Could send you prose poems about scenery, but don't feel right spending your money. Stop. There is no war in Cuba. Signed, Wheeler. Any answer?
Yes, dear Wheeler, you provide the prose poems. I'll provide the war.
That's fine, Mr.
When he was not starting the Spanish-American War for American imperialism with his yellow journalism, he was the chief propagandist against cannabis, because now with the decorticator in 1935, cannabis became a huge threat to the millions he had invested in the timber industry. After all, cannabis can yield much more paper in less time and impact than logging. He set about to make a new drug called marijuana illegal, because if he called it cannabis, people would have thought he was crazy, since it was so prevalent in everyone's world. William Randolph Hearst printed racist stories about blacks and Hispanics raping white women. And soon after, Reefer Madness was released in 1936, showing people having psychotic and murderous breaks.
But at a terrible price. Debauchery, violence, murder, suicide, and the ultimate end of the marijuana addict. Hopeless insanity. See this important pill now, before it is too late.
Cannabis is so versatile that Henry Ford actually made a car out of hemp fiber that was lighter than steel and 10 times as strong. Here's a video of a man using an axe on the hemp car to demonstrate how strong it is.
The magic ingredient is hemp. It's in the body panels, it's in the rear spoiler, and it's also being used in the manufacture of the seats.
Take a look at the exterior of the house. This is hempcrete. It's a mixture of hemp, lime, and water.
Henry Ford not only used hemp fiber to build the car, he even used hemp oil to fuel it. In fact, Rudolf Diesel, who invented the diesel engine, originally used hemp oil to power his car. Meanwhile, John D. Rockefeller was dumping gasoline into the Cuyahoga River because he had no use for gasoline, and it caused the river to burn. John D. Rockefeller immediately moved to have the gasoline engine become the standard of the auto industry, because it served his industry over the farmers that would have benefited from the industrial use of hemp oil. Prohibition of alcohol lasted from 1919 to 1933. The federal government used it as a way to push its federal power on the states and created this huge bureaucracy to fight alcohol. When alcohol was made legal again, the government shifted to narcotics, and the number one on that list was cannabis, which accounts for over 80% of the, quote, illicit drug use. Harry Anslinger was the head of the newly created division of the Treasury Department called the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. He declared on this new drug called marijuana, saying, quote, "Reefer makes the darkies think they're as good as white men. Marijuana leads to pacifism and communist brainwashing. You smoke a joint and you're likely to kill your brother. Marijuana is the most violent causing drug in the history of mankind." So between racism and the false belief that it will make blacks pacified communist murderers, the marijuana tax passed in 1937 with little or no debate, and most congressmen didn't even know cannabis was included in this, since they called it marijuana. By making easily grown cannabis illegal, it also gave support to the centralized drug trade that the Anglo-American Empire runs, going all the way back to the British East Indian Company, the Opium Wars, and even today with Dick Grasso trying to get the FARC and Colombia to invest in the stock market, and HSBC laundering drug money even today. Things that cannot go on forever won't. After spending trillions of dollars over the next few decades on a failed drug war, we now have more prisoners in the prison industrial complex of America than Stalin ever had in his gulags. I believe that like the last Great Depression made alcohol legal, this next Greatest Depression will make nature legal once again with cannabis. If it was not a threat to power, then why on earth would they make it illegal? After all, there is not one death ever in thousands of years attributed to smoking cannabis.
A councilman from Dearborn, Michigan is outraged over a 911 call. He wants to know why no charges have been filed against a police officer who admits to confiscating marijuana from suspects and then baking it in brownies. And once he and his wife were full and high, they thought they'd overdosed and called 911.
I think I'm having an overdose, and so is my wife.
Overdose of what?
Marijuana. I don't know if it had something in it. Can you please send rescue?
Did you guys have fever or anything?
No, I think we're dying.
Okay, how much did you guys have?
I don't know, we made brownies, and I think we're dead. Time is going by really, 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 really slow.
Well, instead of being charged, Instead of being charged, the police department let the officer resign. His wife was not charged either. So far, police officials have not commented on the case.
Yet over 400,000 people die from tobacco every year just in the United States. People will say that people would abuse cannabis and that's why it should be made illegal. Have you looked at how people are abusing food, video games, porn, alcohol, prescription drugs, consumerism, and the entire planet? Why don't we just make everything else illegal? Or at least the things that actually kill people? No, people should be able to do whatever they want to do, including cannabis, so long as it doesn't harm anyone else. In fact, the government would have you believe that it's so dangerous that they list cannabis as a Class 1 drug, and is listed more dangerous than cocaine and meth. Have you seen what meth does to people? How is cannabis more dangerous than that? The real reason why cannabis and most other drugs that are in the Class 1 list are considered more dangerous is because they're experiential drugs that open up the consciousness of humanity.
A lot of people have this thought when they take these, does anybody know about this? Because it's really like, it's like a secret. It's like this fundamental thing about the human brain, but no one knows about it and no one talks about it.
I remember walking down this tunnel of light and feeling like Bill and I were walking into a spaceship. Bill was just asking, who are you and why are you here? And just basically being told that The boundaries of space and time are all in our minds, and that we all are one, and everything is one. We all are one, and everything is one. We all are one, and everything is one.
Today, a young man on acid realized that all matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration, that we are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. There is no such thing as death. Life is only a dream, and we're the imagination of ourselves. Here's Tom with the weather.
Any drug that dulls human senses, from alcohol to the 45 million unfeeling antidepressant zombies, is fine according to the government, so long as you get a permission slip from them. But natural drugs like cannabis, ayahuasca, psychedelic mushrooms, peyote are illegal because they open up the human consciousness beyond the illusion of the control world and reveal that there is a deeper, more powerful existence than what is forced in front of us. As we come to the close of the Age of Oil, and the men that warped our reality with the latest revolution of this debt and death paradigm start to fade away, humanity is going to be faced with a choice to either continue spreading debt and death through collectivism and building unsustainable and dangerous worlds for our children, or are we finally going to become conscious and realize that we are all one and start to build societies that are sustainable and resonate with nature? I believe that silver and cannabis will be the two most important commodities to deal with the collapse of the debt and death empire built on the back of oil. Silver will be used as money to replace the petrodollar and will be a key component into the next generation of industries that will blossom out of the ashes of the current collapse. Cannabis will also have a major role, as millions of people will no longer have access to their antidepressants, gasoline, or cheap clothes from China. Cannabis will fill the natural solution for the problems of humanity. Look for more states to make gold and silver legal tender and legalize cannabis, because those states will be the ones that come out of this collapse the fastest and strongest.
Well, Doug, U.S. Senator Mitch McConnell says he's had long discussions with Senator Rand Paul and Ag Commissioner James Comer on the economic benefits of industrialized hemp, and concluding, you can see here, I'm convinced, McConnell says, that allowing its production will be a positive development for Kentucky's farm families and economy.
I hope to at least open Silver Stacker's eyes to the truth about cannabis, and I hope the new Silver Bullet Silver Shield Cannabis Medallion makes millions of politically active and freedom-loving cannabis users aware of the massive potential of silver. I created the Cannabis Medallion as a mock of the second most popular silver coin in the world, the Canadian maple leaf. If we're going to pay homage to a leaf, what better leaf in the world to do that to than the cannabis leaf? With all of its thousands of uses and benefits to humanity, from fuel to food to paper to clothing to manufacturing to medicinal uses, it is time that we made this decentralized, easily grown, abundant crop legal once again. The Silver Bullet Silver Shield Cannabis is expertly sculpted by our famed sculptress Heidi Wastweet to almost look like the Canadian maple leaf, except with some major changes. First, I replaced Canada with cannabis since their spelling is so similar, and then I used the outline of the maple leaf, but made it look like we restruck it with the cannabis leaf over it. We also changed the French saying of argent pure, which means pure silver, with the French phrase for legalized nature. After all, it is insane to think that we would take something that has so many obvious benefits away from humanity. The Silver Bullet Silver Shield Cannabis is finished off with Heidi Wastweet's initials HW on the bottom of the leaf. Please enjoy this and use it wisely.